kila siku ya Jumapili. Tunakurausha, tunakuchangamsha kwa mziki unaokusisimua na kukukuza kiroho. Tunaangazia wasanii mbalimbali wanaochipuka ili mradi kukufahamisha wewe. Na pia kwenye safari ya Ukristo tutakuletea shuhuda za Wakristo mbalimbali, kwani unayopitia wamepitia na wengine.
Sondo nikaokoka. Date 2 April 2016.
Yote 9-10 ni neno kutoka kwa wachungaji mbalimbali ili kukuimarisha kwenye safari ya Ukristo.
Jesus is the way, the truth and the life.
Bila shaka yote haya unayapata ndani ya 47 Sifa. Nami Liz Mutuku ndani ya TV 47.
All right, thank you very much for staying with us on TV 47 Breakfast Show. Indeed, it is a beautiful morning, but we are receiving news that is not so beautiful, not beautiful at all, of the demise of a Member of Parliament from Sambweni, from Kwale County, Suleiman Dori, who has passed on. And the confirmation is that he was suffering from cancer. Tunapata habari kwamba mbunge wa eneo bunge la Msambweni, county ya Kwale, Suleiman Dori, ameaga dunia, and we are indeed passing our condolences to the family and to everyone who is from Sambweni, particularly because they have lost a leader this morning. Thank you very much for staying with us. Do remember the SMS line is 22047. We're still waking somebody up. Even as we talk about the handshake, moving into the anniversary of the handshake, what has it borne of the country of Kenya? What has it borne for us as a country? What has it exactly given birth to that you can mention as a Kenyan this morning? And even so, as we look at what is happening in our nation, together with the analysts through the eye of the papers, we have the Standard, which on the very first page talks of isolated, and this is because particularly in the weekend we saw Raila Odinga, who is the ODM leader, and President Uhuru Kenyatta watching the Mashemeji Derby together, while Deputy President William Ruto was on a different mission altogether. And it is the first time that the Deputy President was not seen at the marathon that belongs to the First Lady, the marathon that is intended to actually improve the health sector, to complement what is happening in the health sector. The half marathon was not attended by the Deputy President, and we're going to be looking at that. Daily Nation uproar over plan to impeach Ruto. Now, the mentions and rumors and definitely statements that have been thrown by one leader or another towards a suggestion that the Deputy President might be facing an impeachment. Now, we also saw the Deputy President giving a very stern response towards the treatment he's given in government, together with those who are supporting him. We're going to play you that video, and also we're going to have you and the analysts tell us what you think about it. And on the Star today, there is a special coverage on ICC, or the case that was forwarded against the Ocampo 6, if you remember, and that included the president himself, President Uhuru Kenyatta, together with the Deputy President, Dr. William Ruto. And now, according to this, right, one person who is a forensic linguist has written statements or has written a book that somehow tries to dig in and give evidence that the case and the statements that were forwarded against President Uhuru Kenyatta, were fabricated, that those were false witnesses, that the statements were not true. The statements that were forwarded or given against Kenyatta were falsified. And we're going to be looking at that together. Tell me what you think and be together with my analyst this morning. You can call in live. I have Milton Lushiri, who is a governance and policy expert, karibu sana. And I have Wakili Philip Mwangale himself, who is a consultant for governance and policy. I got that right? And leadership. It's always a long statement all the time. All right. Let's begin with the ICC case. And to remember our viewer at home that I want you to realize that you have a chance this morning of being part of this team. So you can call in live and tell me what you think about all this, or text in live. You have that privilege this morning. Uhuru ICC evidence fabricated. Philip Mwangale, we remember very well the Campo 6. We had Francis Muthaura, we had Uhuru Kenyatta himself, who is the current president of Kenya. We have Deputy President William Ruto, we had Hussein Ali, we had Henry Koske, and we had the very small fish in that group, who was Joshua Arap Sang himself. And the cases varied from murder, rape, deportation, and persecution. Right now, according to this writer, who is, a forensic linguist in this statement, the witnesses against President Uhuru Kenyatta were fabricated. He tries to go into the investigation and how the investigations were collected. And the first thing that he says is that the investigating body could not relate with the communities that were giving this evidence because of language barrier. That is the first evidence. What do you have to say about this?
Well, even before language barrier, because that can be sorted out by translation, which I believe occurred to a very large extent.
Right. And he said they were not accurate, the translation.
That could be the case. Mm-hmm. But the originating process around the ICC case was political. Because if you remember clearly, after Ocampo had concluded his investigations and he was now ready to commence charges, there was the Bahasha, Ocampo. Mm-hmm. And that envelope was, before it came out as a report that was going to charge a number of Kenyans, the two principals then, Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga, were involved in selection of names. So this was a list that was spread out so that it would look like it covered both sides of the political divide. Uhuru Kenyatta was on Mwai Kibaki's side. William Ruto was from the ODM side. Sang was from the ODM side. It was a balance. So it was not a legal process in as much as it was a political process. It had more political connotations than it had legal ones. So I agree to a large extent that there was pressure to commence the proceedings. There was pressure to ensure that a certain shred of evidence, a certain weave of evidence was weaved around these individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Milton, what does that say about the ICC as a whole?
ICC has always been termed as an international criminal court. But if you keenly interrogate the events, that the processes that it adopts in solving some of these cases, you realize that most of them are skewed, especially to achieve a determined end. For example, if you look at the case of Syria right now, it warrants the ICC to come in and take charge of the situation and determine if crimes against humanity have been done, which in fact crimes against humanity has been done. So up to now we've not seen anything or anyone in Syria to have been taken to the court and all that. But when it came to a Kenyan case, they happened to have acted very swiftly and to come and give what has a face of justice. But indeed, if you ask me, I didn't see any form of justice being dispensed there because of some of the reasons Mwangale has mentioned, it happened to have been a political process to appease the international community and also to make ICC appear that it is functioning.
All right.
Yeah. So if you look at the case of, it's called Joseph Ntaganda or something from Congo, you find that much as there were allegations against him, the process went on for a long time, and eventually he was found culpable, and is the only case that I've seen that it has been taken successfully, and the one that was involved in the process got jailed because of that, and very few others. And if you look at them, all those cases are African cases. You'll not see a case from Italy or any other. So if you ask me, I think the ICC has failed in dispensing its mandate.
All right. Before we probably look further, Philip Mwangale, into just how the conclusion came or how accurate this would be that they were falsified, because they're talking about monopoly investigation and all that. Let us look at the transition politics in our country, because this is a moment that now we are talking about the handshake, and talking about the handshake means we remember very well the origin of the handshake. Transition politics has always been marred with violence and murders and court cases that probably never really, we never really got to know what exactly happened. Looking at our politics and the transition between one government or one leadership and the other, what do you think was the origin of these presidents for us as a country and for us as a continent? Because this has always been with us.
I think we have to trace it back to the pre-colonial period, because then there was a kind of oppression that was met by resistance from the African states. And after the continent gained its respective independence, each country gaining their own independence, those that took over power, a majority of those that took over power from the colonialists, carried on the oppression from the colonial masters. And any form of opposition that arose from within whatever ranks at the time was met by even more oppression. And so there was a need of those that took over power to cement their authority, to cement the power that they had gained. And it has been a downfall since then. And if you take Kenya, for example, looking at Mzee Jomo Kenyatta's presidency, opposition was not met kindly. It was not appreciated, and that was taken over by the late President Moi. It was carried on a little in Kibaki's government, and it has been cemented by greed that we have now, that has now become accustomed to what government is today. So those that are in power do not appreciate opposition. They consider opposition as a fight to dethrone them. Opposition in other functioning democracies are healthy in governments running, in ensuring that governments are kept in check, in making sure that leadership is healthy and governance delivers solutions. But for us, greed informs our leadership processes. So our transitions have been marred by selfishness, selfish interests, selfish political interests, economic interests that a cabal of individuals have made sure that their economic interests must be protected, and greed sums it up.
All right. Milton, on the same, what do you think was the foundation of the murders and conflicts that come in within our transition politics? And basing again on what he has said, the greed, economic greed and all that, do you think that at some point Kenyans at independence expected that they would have the resources available equally divided among the Kenyans, among the citizens, but then the realization that even with the meager resources, other people have taken charge and pulled more towards their side, so that the problem is not really that we do not have enough resources as a country, but the fact that some people have controlled and taken more than they ought to take and others have remained without.
I think the problem that comes, or the origin of all this transitional politics, violence that come with transition of power, has its stem in competition for resources. At independence, there was a new hope that now that the colonial master has gone, we shall have access to these resources, what we call the national cake, and it would be equitably distributed amongst us. But it so happened that at the independence, a few individuals happened to have taken advantage of the situation and amassed a lot of wealth to themselves, and these individuals happened to have been the ones in power. So from there, the politics became of preservation of status quo and perpetration of the same, so that you preserve what you have and then you perpetrate it. Therefore, any other person that comes and threatens that kind of a setup, he is perceived as a threat to the system or to the establishment. He is perceived to come and take out resources from them. It is never about that these resources belong to the entire Kenyan population, and we need to have systems and institutions that ensure that there is equitable distribution of resources. No, it's about individuals. Therefore, when elections come, stakes are very high. And that is why emotions are normally very charged. It is not because of any other thing, but it is because of the perception that resources will go to particular people and it will not be us. And that is why there is a lot of premium placed on elections, and therefore
the conflicts that come.
Exactly.
All right, and the violence. And that is the reason I'm asking this question this morning. Do you believe that ICC would have given a solution concerning the Ocampo 6 and the 2007 post-election violence? Do you believe that? And also the report right now that the case and evidence against Uhuru Kenyatta might have been fabricated. What do you think about that? The SMS line is 22047, 22047, and online at TV47KE on Twitter and on Facebook. Unaonekana kwamba Rais Uhuru Kenyatta alikuwa ameekelewa katika ile kesi ya ICC ambapo tulikuwa na Ocampo 6. Philip Mwangale, it looks from this deduction that we are always going to be in this position if nothing actually comes in to save us soon. Yes. Because of the greed that is still in existence, and we're going to look at that from what's happening with the BBI and all that. Our hope in this moment, when we're talking about the ICC cases and the 2007 post-election violence, was entirely on the ICC. Many Kenyans believed that there would be a solution and justice would be found from the ICC. And now, as it turns out, legally everything was wrong. All the way from accusing the ICC of not being able to conduct proper investigation, all the way from saying that, well, they monopolized the whole investigation and they were not able to accurately bring the report out on what exactly happened. Where is the hope for Kenya or any other African country that is still going to have the kind of transitional politics that we have? Because even right now we are seeing ourselves going towards that direction if nothing happens.
I think our greatest undoing was believing that our solution lay with the ICC. And the international community had whipped us towards that direction, that only the ICC could solve our problems. And we forgot, and this is the African problem, that we have forgotten that we can develop homegrown solutions, we can develop autochthonous solutions to our problems. And without going outside the continent and outside of ourselves to seek those solutions. We do not believe that we have the capacity to deliver ourselves from the shackles that we have found ourselves in. And the fact that we could lay all our hopes with the ICC, yet we had the capacity to develop our own legal solutions to these problems.
Did we have the capacity?
We have the capacity. We had little
faith in even then we had very little faith in our judicial system.
Well, corazon, faith and capacity are different things. We have the capacity, but we do not have the faith in our capacity.
Do you believe that
solutions.
in that moment there was anyone in the judiciary who would actually constitute any system that would, whatever this case, handle this case?
You know, when after the genocide in Rwanda, there was a a task force and a court that was established specifically for the Rwanda genocide. And after that court had its sessions, there were people that were found culpable of whatever had happened in Rwanda. And if you look at the steps that Rwanda has taken to date, I think one of the things that we could attribute it to is the fact that they sat down and developed solutions from within themselves. What we have done, and this we have done continually, is we have sought help from without before first seeking what is within us. So we might not have faith in our systems. We might not have had faith in our systems then, but we had the capacity to deliver justice to those that were victims of the crimes.
Milton had something to say about that, and this is because we've seen very many people, very many bodies compromised, even the LSK. Right now we are asking if a DPP and the DCI can actually accurately do their work.
You know, I remember this motion came to Parliament, and there was a huge debate in Parliament whether the cases should be taken to ICC or should they be tried here at home.
Hague, and they called the word was Hague.
Yeah, Hague.
Yes.
Yeah, and I heard some people saying, why in the Hague? Wengine wanasema, and others said, hey, wacha your kesi tuzifanyie hapa. Now, but of course, the Hague side won because it was perceived that if the cases were to be tried here, we would not have dispensed justice as it were.
Right.
Because
did that perception have foundation? Because in that moment, there was a lot that determined that
yes, that perception had a basis because of course, previous experiences with our justice system. You remember the disputed election, the court ruled against the appellants and things like that. So it was a perception that if the cases were to be tried here, justice would not have been dispensed. I would like to also reiterate what Philip has said. You remember around this time, it's when we started the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. Right. And these were ideas borrowed from countries that have gone through tumultuous seasons, for example, South Africa and Rwanda. So Kenyans tried to borrow a leaf from these economies so that they might try to unite people and try to find solution to these problems. But you find that the findings of Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, much as it has been publicized, no steps have been taken to follow through those recommendations. And a lot of funds were put into coming up with those reports. That report is somewhere accumulating dust.
And that is the reason why, just hold on a bit, that's the reason why I was asking Philip Mwangali if he believes that there is any body that can actually successfully handle such cases. Because even in that moment when we were compiling the TJRC report, we are depending on the government, which is part of the system that is involved within the violence within the transitional politics. We are depending on that government to actually implement. And this is the same government that was holding on to power or something like that. So how possible is it that we cannot, that we can depend on ourselves?
Corazon, what I've just mentioned that when Rwanda happened, the genocide in Rwanda happened, there was the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda that was set up specifically for that issue in Rwanda. When the same had happened in Yugoslavia, there was a tribunal called the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, specifically for what had happened in Yugoslavia then, Serbia and Herzegovina at that time. And we had the capacity, and I still insist that we had the capacity to set...
Who would have driven the capacity? Because even that capacity needed somebody that would drive it.
You know, then there was a lot of pressure from the international community for Kenya to stabilize otherwise for Kenya to come to peace. We would have used that pressure to galvanize us towards creating a mechanism for solving whatever.
So still we would have needed external forces
that would
to
have
drive.
given us a push, but we will not have wholly dependent.
But you realize then
international
that would need them to actually come and interfere with our democracy, sovereignty, and all that. Because if they're to drive that capacity, they get involved.
Milton has mentioned about the TJRC. TJRC was our own making,
right?
And it was a wonderful report.
Look at what
it gave us an
it.
opportunity to restore the factory, to restore us back to the factory settings.
Right.
But we chose not to take it. It was politicized, and we decided that we were not going back to solve the things that had happened in the past. So I'm still insisting that we had the capacity, we still have the capacity, but we have chosen continually to go without, from outside our borders.
All right. Milton, I'm coming back to you so that you can complete your statement. Do remember we are talking about what's happening in our country through the eye of the paper, and the current discussion is on the ICC. Apparently, according to a forensic linguist, the evidence that was pushed forward against President Uhuru Kenyatta was fabricated. That the body that was doing investigation on behalf of ICC, that was led by, we remember, the prosecutor Bensouda, I remember very well, that was Bensouda, that was happening in this country. That was not done properly. What do you think about that? Kesi ambazo zilikuwa zimewasilishwa na zile evidence against President Uhuru Kenyatta kwamba zote zilikuwa za uongo. Lakini usibanduke, we are coming back to look forward into exactly where our hope would be. Did we have the capacity as a country to investigate and prosecute? All right, welcome back. You're watching TV47 Breakfast Show. The hashtag is TV47 Breakfast on Twitter and on Facebook as well. Daniel Evans is saying, tuned from Kitale, karibu sana. Dante's Sham unasema LD mkochonjo kabisa. Wale wengine ambao pia wako nami ni kama Dante's, bado unasema uko Eldorado kwenyewe kabisa. Tena huyu ambaye anaitwa Eric Makiage unasema Kenya iko tamu sana, no strikes, so we can all work in harmony. Njoroge anasema hakuna corruption. Swali ambalo tulikuwa tumekuuliza ni kwamba je, unaona kama handshake imezalisha nini? What exactly has the handshake born into our country since the inception, considering that now we are moving into celebrating officially the first anniversary of the handshake that was a merger between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the opposition leader Raila Odinga, after the opposition leader swore himself in as the people's president, and that was quite historic. And that takes us back to our discussion this morning. Keep tweeting and keep SMSing. Also on 22047. We're talking about the ICC cases. The reason being, now a forensic linguist, having done his analysis, now believes that the evidence that was forwarded against President Uhuru Kenyatta at the ICC was falsified. Maoni yako ni yapi? Yale ambayo yote anasema kwamba yalisemekana kama tuhuma kwake Rais Uhuru Kenyatta kule ICC, wakati ambapo tulikuwa na bahasha ya Ocampo, kwamba yote yalikuwa ni ya uongo. Wale ambao walikuja kufanya uchunguzi, akina Fatou Bensouda ambaye alikuwa prosecutor, apparently that information was falsified. And I was speaking with the analysts today. We have Milton Lushiri and Philip Mwangale. Milton Lushiri, we were talking about the capacity to actually have been able to have a body that would investigate in our country. We talked about the TJRC report, and that was constituted. And my problem or my question was, who would have driven that capacity? Looking or seeing what we have how we have handled the TJRC report. Did we really have the capacity instead of depending on ICC?
Our country, we have one challenge. The politics of the day is higher and stronger than the institutions that we have. When in essence it ought to be the other way around. The institutions need to be stronger than the politics, so that whatever happens under the political arena is being supervised by the institutions. But this is not the case even with ICC, because personality has taken so much influence on the politics that we have for the day. So even if we had the intention of trying these cases locally at home, it could not have worked out, because let's be very realistic about it. It could not have worked out, because the individuals that are very powerful, sort of demigods, that they are even above institutions. Even if we were to make it appear that it represents most views, or it represents a cross-section of opinions, it still would not have worked, because some of these institutions these individuals are extremely powerful. So for me, much as ICC was not a balanced body to have dispensed justice on this matter, it was still our best shot under the circumstances. If these things were to be tried at home, that would have just been chaotic.
Right. I'd ask Philip if he agrees or not agree with you. But Philip, let us move into another angle of this. We have Mungiki Criminal Organization. You know, that is the report that we had as a country, and we know the truth behind that. We have had other business communities that have come in during such transitional violence in transitional politics. On the ground, what is it, in your opinion, or in your view as a young leader, that was real, that was also reflected maybe in the accusation that was done, because we had cases, murder, rape, deportation, persecution, all this. And I'm asking this because I know that even right now we are at a very edgy position politically. What is it that was real during the 2007 post-election violence within this charges?
Before I answer that, it is suspect that this piece is talking about only Uhuru's side.
Yes, true.
That had evidence fabricated against him, and we must take that in the context of what is happening right now politically. The fact that Ruto is facing an attack from whatever he's calling the system at this moment. So there might be, and there were rumors before that Ruto's side of the case at ICC will be reactivated. But that is a discussion for another day. But what I must say is the nature of the charges at the ICC is very broad. When an individual of this people's status is accused of rape, deportation, those are wide-ranging accusations, wide-ranging charges. But there are individuals who perpetrated individually those acts. There is a man who raped a helpless woman somewhere. There is an individual who killed his neighbor. Those people have not been brought to book. In as much as, if at all, if we take this scenario that these individuals at the ICC were convicted, they would have been convicted, yes, but the specific people who committed those atrocities will not have been brought to book. And that is the reality on the ground, that there are people who perpetrated those crimes, they are still walking scot-free, they are still going around, and those that were victims of these crimes know they are villains, and they are living with them. So if anything happens to this country and things erupt, we have bottled up emotions. There are people who have bottled up emotions from the 2007 elections. And the fact that we have not solved them conclusively, we have not gotten to the bottom of the matter, it begs a lot of questions. The other issue also is the issue to do with the IDPs. To date, there are still people who are internally displaced in their own country. Yet there were funds that had been allocated to resettle them. There were a lot of things that had been captured as intended to solve whatever had happened in 2007 and 2008. So the reality on the ground is these things are still happening. We still have gangs, the likes of Mungiki. We still have groups that are being marshaled towards a certain direction. And if if things get out of hand, then these gangs, they sort of have instructions to do the needful. That is the position we are in as a country. We have a culture of forgetting. We have a culture of diverting attention to things that do not really matter. Yeah, the things that matter, we have shelved them to a corner. So that is the reality on the ground, that if anything was to happen in this country, there are groups that have been marshaled tribally. There are groups that are criminal organizations, and this information is out in the public. And I appreciate that the government has tried to weed out such groups, but we have not done enough.
All right. Milton, what is the truth on the ground? Because we understand also the last election, there's a group that emerged from nowhere, and the people who live especially in areas of Lakisama and Umoja and Kayole can actually talk about people who came out beating people, breaking into houses, and there were so many injuries that occurred during this period. As much as we may end up looking at reports that are falsifying the evidence that was brought or the charges were brought against the Ocampo Six, what is it that we know as a country, that these ones are real and these ones are threats?
As a country, the culture of militia and sectarian movements are there, and it is very live with us, especially when it comes to periods that are just next to election. During that time, we get to see that most of these groups are revived, and they start doing this kind of things. And it is sad to note that most of it is usually to achieve political ends. And most of them are on the employment list of prominent politicians. They use them as a tool to whip particular communities or particular groups of people to a certain direction. For example, around Lakisami area, there is in 2017, early in the morning, we got up to news that said that about 11 people had been hacked to death by a dreaded militia group, so as to achieve a particular political end. And then this particular group, nothing was said about it, much as calls were rife that let's bring these people to book. Nothing was done about it. The other incident is the other day when Honorable Simba Arati and Didimas Baraza engaged in a squabble, and he have happened to order some young men to chase him out of that political meeting. Nothing was done concerning that. Much as there were calls to bring the perpetrator to book, nothing was done. So it means that it's a live fact that is with us. Right. Yeah,
okay,
which needs to be...
exactly, and I'm going to ask you, yes, gentlemen, as young leaders, what exactly the solution would be. And even so, remember, the question this morning is, what exactly has the handshake borne for our country, in your opinion? Ni faida gani tumepata kutokana na ule uwiano kati ya Rais Uhuru Kenyatta na Raila Odinga ambaye alikuwa kiongozi wa upinzani? In your opinion, or in your position as a Kenyan, what exactly has the handshake borne into our country? And that was the merger or the collision between the President Uhuru Kenyatta and the self-sworn-in President of the People, who was the leader of the opposition then, Raila Odinga, who now are driving one agenda, the BBI agenda. And the reason why this is being a concern right now is that the Deputy President looks like is isolated, and the wing that is supporting the Deputy President looks as agitated as possible. And as we prepare to play your clip where the Deputy President responded, let me take your views, gentlemen. We have seen what is happening with the BBI and the handshake, and now the response that the Deputy President gave. The reason why this is very close to the ICC case is we've seen a response on Twitter the other day that says, if anything happens to DP Ruto, then you will have to turn a section of Kenya into a graveyard. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah. Isn't this edgy and getting us close to these cases, or the ICC cases that we did not solve, the JRC report that we did not solve? Are we not getting into a slippery slope, Philip Mwangale?
There's something called quicksand. Once you get into a quicksand area, losing your life just because you're trying to get out of the quicksand. But you need somebody to lift you out of that position. But we got into a quicksand and struggled to get out. But when we found out that we could not get out completely, we decided now to build a shelter in the area that we were stuck in. What those sentiments point towards is not new. This is the reality on the ground, that our politics and our leadership, our governance, and everything around us has been ethnocentricized. And that is the sad reality that we must face. The fact that a certain section of Kenyans would say something like that, a section that is allied to a particular individual, says a lot. And it is good that these ones have spoken out. There are those that are yet to speak out. There are those that wait to speak by actions. So that is a sad reality. And these people are serious. It is not something that can be termed as wishful thinking. This is the sad reality that if anything was to happen, then we should expect a few things to follow. And I mentioned this immediately the BBI report was released, that the BBI report would serve to break this country apart even more than it's supposed to build us together, because it is a cosmetic attempt to fix this country. Yet we need a radical surgery to fix this nation. So we are yet to see a lot of things coming to the fore, a lot of things that have been born out of the handshake and out of the BBI process that has been politicized and hijacked by political interests.
All right. Milton, taking from that, what we are seeing right now with the memories of Kiambaa Church and many others that are really grave, still fresh in our minds, can we still say that what is happening, well, we know that is definitely a transition politics starting to play out early. Is it still battle of resources within communities, or is it an individual vendetta between two people who are trying to protect something? In your opinion, what exactly is happening? Where are we in this slippery slope politically?
This is an unfortunate situation that we will always find ourselves in after every 5 years. For the basic reason that the problem has not been addressed. We try to treat...
The problem being?
Yeah, we try to treat the ailment, but in the process we treat the symptom, but we forget about the ailment. The ailment here basically are very fundamental things that people hold dear to. For example, land. The land issue is a major issue, which we have chosen to conveniently ignore and assume and bury our head in the sand that that issue has been solved. The government needs to address this issue quite conclusively, because there are people who had chunks of land, but those lands were taken away from them and reallocated to other people. So there's that anger and a sense of loss that it needs to be compensated to them. Therefore, until and unless that has been addressed, still we shall be experiencing this kind of thing. Even for someone to treat that will turn half the country into graveyards, it is out of this kind of sentiments. So the issue of land has not been solved. That needs to be addressed. Whether they will compensate people with other lands, or whether they will be given money, or whether they will agree to be communal land, that needs to be addressed. All right. That's the first thing. And then the other thing is we need to fix our institutions. Because right now we are not talking about IBC anymore. When we know that IBC was accused for taking sides in the last election. So right now it's very quiet. This is the best time to fix the IBC. If the recruitment process did not take place correctly, this is the time to fix it. This is the time to get new commissioners. Not when we are 3 or 4 months to elections. That's when we want to take commissioners into office. Most definitely people want to put commissioners who will serve their interests. Therefore, we need to solve the issue of our institutions. We need to solve the judiciary, we need to solve the IBC, so that we don't get to experience this kind of thing. And then finally, we need to get rid of personality cult in the politics, because right now politics is about my people, our people, and unless so-and-so is on the ballot, then that will not be an election. We need to move from that as a country and get to a point that whoever has merit and meets chapter 6 of the Constitution can vie for political office and still win.
All right.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the battle we're having right now, because a deputy president believes that he is being denied a chance by a system to actually reach the presidency. Let us watch the response of the deputy president towards everything that is happening in this political age era.
Makarani na mabroka ambao wanakwenda kwa magavana, wanaenda kwa wabunge, wanapigia masimu MCA, wewe ukionekana na fulani, wewe ukiwa rafiki wa fulani, tutakufungulia kesi, utapelekwa kotini, utashtakiwa, hata kama una makosa utashtakiwa. Na wanaweka hofu kwa viongozi, kwa wananchi wa taifa letu la Kenya. Hiyo ni siasa duni. And therefore I want to say, for the avoidance of doubt, we live in a democratic nation as Kenya. And citizens, leaders, public officers should have the opportunity to make choices that they have decided on their own. To try and use the criminal justice system to perpetuate a certain political agenda or narrative is in itself criminal. And I want to say, for the avoidance of doubt, leaders in Kenya today, governors in Kenya today, members of parliament, MCAs, are being treated to intimidation, blackmail, threats that they will be taken to this court or that court, or taken to this corner or the other corner because of their political affiliation. When did Kenya sink that low? That today people are operating. Makarani na mabroka ambao wanakwenda kwa magavana, wanaenda kwa wabunge, wanapigia masimu MCA, wewe ukionekana na fulani, wewe ukiwa rafiki wa fulani, tutakufungulia kesi, utapelekwa kotini, utashtakiwa, hata kama una makosa utashtakiwa. Na wanaweka hofu kwa viongozi, kwa wananchi wa taifa letu la Kenya. Hiyo ni siasa duni. And therefore I want to say, for the avoidance of doubt, we live in a democratic nation as Kenya. And citizens, leaders, public officers should have the opportunity to make choices that they have decided on their own. To try and use the criminal justice system to perpetuate a certain political agenda or narrative is in itself criminal. And I want to say, for the avoidance of doubt, leaders in Kenya today, governors in Kenya today, members of parliament, MCAs, are being treated to intimidation, blackmail, threats that they will be taken to this court or that court, or taken to this corner or the other corner because of their political affiliation. When did Kenya sink that low? That today people are operating politics using blackmail and intimidation. These public servants in our offices should work in accordance with what their job description is. They should not be using the criminal justice system to try and achieve political ends, to intimidate, blackmail, and threaten people that this will happen and that will happen. I am the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, elected by the people of Kenya. And I have no apologies to make to anybody. And I want to tell those public officers using those offices that soon, and very soon, we will call them out. They must stop the nonsense they are engaged in of making telephone calls to people, to leaders, blackmailing people left, right, and center. If they are men enough, let them come forward and face me. Let them not hide behind shadows and behind telephone calls.
All right, that was the Deputy President. And who exactly is the system that the Deputy President is talking about? Philip Mwangale, before we go over the uproar over impeachment as we finish, what do you think about Deputy President's sentiments, and who exactly is this system that the Deputy President is referring to, in your opinion, or in your judgment?
You know, when before Jesus was crucified at the garden, he cried out. I think he was facing too much pressure, and he cried out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. I think this is DP William Ruto's Eloi moment, only that he's not crying out to his father, he's crying out to his brother Uhuru Kenyatta. Because the persecutions he has been facing have now come full throttle. But I must say this, the sentiments, you know, he has spoken about a lot of things that are very true, things that are real and happening in this country. The students of history will remember a king in Egypt called King Amhose I. And during King Amhose's time, it was a complete departure from the kings that came before him. During his time, the government developed into a nationalist, autocratic regime, a fascist regime. There was regimentation of industry and drivers of economy. There was suppression of opposition. And at that point, during that time, anyone who seemed to oppose the king would face execution. It is not different from what we are facing right now. Any kind of opposition, any kind of sentiments that are could look like they are opposed or different from what the government is speaking, are faced with suppression. And it is true that there are people who have been whipped towards a certain side, away from DP William Ruto. He's talking of governors that have been threatened with charges in court if they play his tune. We have seen some people go home, or Waititu went home, and it was a political thing. He went home not because of incompetence, which was apparent anyway. He went home because he was aligned to DP William Ruto. Sonko was also facing the same issues. He went to Upper Hill, Kijito cha Utakaso, and he's now clean. And he does not speak.
Now, what do you mean he's clean? Sonko has let go.
Of course, we know what he is. We know what most of these leaders are. But it seems like these days, if you play towards a certain side, if you're singing the BBI chorus, then you are beyond reproach. That is what is happening. But if you're on DP William Ruto's side, then you are as dirty and as vile as they come. So what he's saying is true. That is what is happening in this country. But I think the wisdom in his camp is either running out, or they're reserving it for the last lap in 2021 or 2022.
The wisdom in whose camp?
In DP William Ruto's camp. Because he's coming out now to speak about these things, yet he was complicit in the first term.
Do you think this is now the zone where he's reached is now a zone where he cannot go back to try and reconcile with the system that he's accusing? You think now this is the beginning of another phase of politics?
I think so. Not really another phase of politics, but another phase of his persecution. I think the system is going to turn up the volume
a little higher.
A little higher.
All right, that is Philip Mwangale. Milton, what is your judgment on this? Because at this point, the Senate Minority Leader James Orengo is talking about the impeachment of DP Ruto, and people who are trying to look into this is saying that he should be afraid, because this process can be turned into a political process and not a legal process. And even as you take on that, from what Philip is talking about, do you believe that the system that's persecuting DP Ruto is Uhuru Kenyatta, President Uhuru Kenyatta?
This is what I call the irony of the handshake. And it is such a coincidence that it is occurring, that all this is happening just when we are about the anniversary, the first anniversary of the handshake. Raila Odinga is a seasoned politician, and that needs to be understood. The handshake of March 9 was to basically unite the country, as it were. But of course, the knife that was behind him was basically Ruto, and how the succession of 2022 will take place. And actually, we've reached the fever pitch of the hidden handshake agenda, which basically is to get Ruto out of the system. So, is it true that there is a system fighting against him? And my answer is an emphatic yes.
Do you think Uhuru Kenyatta is the system that's fighting against DP's ambitions?
Uhuru Kenyatta may be in the system or may be not in the system. But what the system does, it dictates who is the next president. And if we want to say that Uhuru is the system, we may miss the point. The point is that there is particular individuals and particular establishments who actually want their ends to be achieved at the end of the day. These people, they actually survive through governments. They preserve their existence, and they want to be relevant with any government that comes in place. So that is the system that he's referring to here. Whether Uhuru is part of it, I may not tell for sure.
All right, Philip has something to say. And the question is, this system that is being mentioned, if it is true indeed, as Milton says, that there is a system that benefits with each and every government, as he says, and that makes us really hopeless as Kenyans, this would indeed be the same system that put DP Ruto in power. What happened that right now it is a system that's fighting against DP Ruto?
Well, first I must say that the president is not really part of the system. If anything, he's just an extension. Before you plug any electrical equipment, you might need an extension.
Is this idea a perception or a reality? Because someone would say that the system would be made of, first of all, a percentage of votes, if there's any manipulation and maybe someone involved in manipulation. I mean, is this system really some group of people seated in some dark room? Is it a perception or a reality?
This is the reality. This is the reality on the ground. There are things we watch in movies that seem abstract, but when you come to this country, you will actually actualize everything that you watch in movies. Whatever is happening right now, whatever is being called the system, this is not abstract. These are things that are happening. When ODM and the opposition was complaining about electoral malpractice and electoral injustice, they were very justified, because they knew that there were people who had interests in the presidency and interests in government that manipulated elections. And this is the reality that sometimes we are not ready to face. Sometimes we want to think that it is the politicians we see at the forefront that are behind all these things. But there is a machination that is behind what is called the deep state.
All right.
There are very influential people in this country that you might actually never see, you might actually never hear from.
All right.
But they decide the course of politics.
Okay, until somebody really gives evidence what the system is really made
Well,
of.
you can't really get evidence aside from what we are seeing right now.
Is it then maybe people who have business interest and all that, but because of time, we are just about to come to a conclusion. Remember, then the conversation has woven around a system that exists, transition politics, and the fact that now we have a handshake between the president and the opposition leader as a country. And then the question is, ni kipi ambacho sisi tumefaidika kutokana na hii swala la handshake? Remember, the SMS line is still open, 22047, and online as well at TV47KE on Twitter and on Facebook. We'll be able to read here as we celebrate the anniversary for the handshake. But gentlemen, as we finish, and Milton, as we come to the very tail end, it looks as if the question or the conversation around transition politics and violence or the conflicts that come with transition politics have already begun. These are indications, because the sentiments online about graveyard, about you should not dare, you will see what will happen. We've had very many of these thrown by Kenyans. What would be the solution? we have somehow deduced that ICC or any other external forces were not able to help us. The reports that we compiled that we were supposed to implement, for instance, in this moment, to talk about the TJC report, the system or the government did not implement. As a young leader, what would accurately bring a solution towards this without us going to the situations that we've had in the past?
Yeah, thank you, Corazon. We've made attempts as a country in order to address the cyclic electoral violence that normally occur after 5 years. And these attempts have been, we've tried to achieve some ends with that, and it hasn't borne fruit. But if you ask me, one of the ways to address this is having a candid national dialogue. Leave alone BBI and those kind of things.
Because BBI looks like a dialogue we're having right now.
Yeah, it has a semblance of dialogue, but in and of itself is just a political tool leading up to 2022.
What would be different about the dialogue, the kind of dialogue you're proposing? Who would be driving the agenda?
The kind of dialogue I'm proposing is one that occurs in a politically serene or neutral environment. An environment
would
that
this
is
be the church?
devoid.
What kind of institution would drive that?
One of the opportunities that can be used for that national dialogue is when we come together during the national prayer days, which normally happens once a year. That is a perfect opportunity because we see most of politicians from different divides coming and putting the political differences aside and addressing the issues of the country.
There have been mentions, sorry to cut you again, there have been mentions of religious leaders being manipulated politically as well.
Yeah, in my proposition, I did not say that prayers should be used as a...
But during these functions?
Yeah, during this function, it's normally a very apolitical environment that can be used to address some of this. The other way is we have an institution called the NCIC, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, that can initiate a national dialogue on how to objectively look at all the issues that face us as a country. Politicians will never give us that kind of a dialogue. Politicians will always look at their end. The BBI process was a product of two politicians meeting and charting way forward for the country. They will always act in their interest. We need an institution to initiate this process and call on board stakeholders that will help us with this kind of thing. And then after that, we could have call it a report or call it an outcome that will need to be legislated on how it will be followed through. But if we just keep doing the BBIs, keep doing the TGRCs and those kind of things, we will still end up where we've started.
All right.
Yeah.
Philip Mangale on the same, and BBI report has a lot of issues of morality, the ethos and all that embedded. And it looks like the kind of conversation maybe we would have if we are to mitigate this tradition and this history that causes a lot of murders and killings. What exactly would we do different from what we're doing with the BBI to initiate a conversation towards cohesion, reconciliation, and do away with the kind of violence that we normally have in this greedy politics? And I know also in the weekend we tried having a conversation on the bodies that are empowered by the Constitution to actually investigate and prosecute cases. Would we bank on our Constitution to be able to achieve a final solution?
I will say three things. One, we have squandered numerous opportunities for us to have that dialogue that Milton is talking about, for us to have a conversation, including this BBI process. This is a squandered opportunity that has already it's already past us. We cannot salvage it anymore because the political class is talking about the BBI rallies ending in March and us having a referendum very soon thereafter. So this is gone. But what we can do is to effect change at the ballot. In as much as we talk about a system or a cabal or an organization called Deep State that has a behavior and a culture of manipulating the political happenings around us.
And that seems abstract to many citizens.
Yes, that seems abstract, yet real. We have the opportunity to effect change at the ballot.
Right.
If Kenyans decided wholesomely en masse that we would want to change this country, there is a revolution that can happen on the ballot that can supersede any kind of machination around the deep state. That is one. Two, we need to really get back to the rule of law. Because when you talk about institutions, we are talking about the rule of law. If those institutions could really work to our advantage and not to the advantage of the political class, and we must hold those institutions to account. We must hold the judiciary to account, we must hold parliament to account, because most of these institutions, and I must hold parliament to a great extent, because it has become an impotent institution in my opinion. So we must hold our institutions to account. We must ensure that what we have set in place to work actually works for us. And you have mentioned about the church and the state and how some church leaders have been roped into the state.
Yes.
The marriage between the church and the state is a very dangerous one. History can bear us witness that where that has happened, it is the society that has suffered. In the Roman Empire, Emperor Constantine at one point he ruled what was called then the Church Catholic. The marriage between the church was solidified then such that the state conducted the affairs of the church. And it is not very far from what is happening. There are some church leaders, and I would call them rogue church leaders, because we have very principled and very upright church leaders who know what they are doing. So if we really got back to our religious and our religious background and soul searched ourselves, because most of the time we would want to get solutions from these politicians, yet they have continually dragged us into a miry bog. Because these people, and this is the reality, these people feign ignorance when it is convenient. They are in a constant phase of selective amnesia and sometimes temporary insanity, which they have managed to drag us into. So we must soul search ourselves. We must decide that we need to change. If we do not make that decision, then we will continually and perpetually be in this position.
All right. I believe, gentlemen, that this is a muddy place that we got ourselves into right from the beginning, because we also remember that in the beginning we had a group led by the opposition leader then, or it seemed like he was in the opposition, Odinga, that talked about land sealing and trying to talk about nepotism and all that. But then we know what happened to that group, and since then we've had this kind of politics. Thank you so much, Philip Mwangale. Asante sana, Milton Lusheri. Well, it has been a candid and very open discussion, and I know that the one thing that you have been left wondering about is the question of the system. Who is the system? Who is the deep state? And how exactly does our vote matter, or the fact that we actually make decision if indeed there is a system that can stop and can exalt and can humble? But then the question continues and the conversation continues. Even with this in mind, we do have the handshake, and we have the handshake driving the BBI agenda, but that is just one of the things that have been born out of the handshake. Wewe kama mwananchi, handshake kama ili swala la uwiano, kwa maoni yako basi limetupa nini kama taifa letu? This is the TV47 Breakfast Show. You've been with me, Corazon Safwan. Emmanuel Tereri is making an entrance with his team to bring to you what's trending, or as we call it, Gumzo Mitandaoni, because this morning you need to know what Kenyans on social media are saying, and it's always very funny. Don't go too far after that. We will be having children who have been taught and have mastered the art of playing musical instruments beyond their age. Don't go too far.